Starting with the issue of the targeting of Michael Chong, as reported in the Globe and Mail in May 2023, Mr. Clow, you emphasized in your evidence this morning that there was no reported physical threat against Mr. Chong, right?
That is my understanding, yes.
You recall, though, that the IMU from 2021, which I know you didn't see at the time, but you've seen since, indicated PRC's interest in my client's relations in Hong Kong, right?
Yes.
Mr. Chong, my client, is not confident that the PRC would refrain from acts of intimidation, coercion, possibly including physical violence against his relations in Hong Kong if PRC thought that doing so might quiet down his critiques of PRC here or otherwise change his conduct. Do you feel confident that PRC would refrain from such acts against my client's relatives in Hong Kong?
So what we were, in answer to a question, I was relating what we were told about the intelligence, and we were told very directly there was no threat to Mr. Chong's safety or that of his family members. A general question of, do I have confidence of China would refrain from physically acting against a Canadian or their family members? I'm trying to think, have we, I don't know that I would phrase it the same way you have, but the intelligence in this case didn't say it, and I hesitate to speculate.
So I do appreciate that the intelligence, well, I haven't seen the full IMU, perhaps you have, but your evidence is that the intelligence didn't indicate any reported physical threats against the relatives in Hong Kong. So I appreciate that. It's still pretty cold comfort from my client. So let me ask you this way. You accept that the PRC is generally regarded as a repressive regime, don't
Yes.
you?
Yes.
And not a rule of law culture. Would
Yes.
you agree? It's not a government that's known for respecting political dissidents. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And you would, I think, also agree that in Hong Kong in particular, PRC has shown acts of squashing political dissent in physically violent ways, among others. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
All right. I suppose what I'm trying to understand is this. We know what the reporting was, and we know the limits of the reporting. But you're not here telling the commissioner that my client is overreacting to have this concern, are you?
No, I'm not actually. And I'm not trying to minimize what was first reported and then told to us in May of last year. And it's why the Prime Minister ensured Mr. Chong was briefed and had an opportunity to directly talk to officials. And it's also why the minister, in consultation with the Prime Minister, issued the directive to say anytime there's information like this, it should be elevated to the Member of Parliament. So we take it very seriously, absolutely. And
that briefing you referred to was actually conducted by Mr. Vigneault for the service as a threat reduction measure, isn't that right?
I'd be going by memory, but I take that to be true.
Well, yes, we've heard that evidence already. And of course, a threat reduction measure, perhaps Mr. Travers is more familiar with this than you are, Mr. Clow, and any of the three of you will do. It's a provision under the CSIS Act that allows the service to take steps to reduce a threat. Isn't that right? I see you nodding.
That's our understanding, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison has since given evidence here that the activities of Wei Zhou, in his view, were not foreign interference. And so my question for you is, if this wasn't foreign interference, why did CSIS regard it as a threat requiring a threat reduction measure? Do you have any answer to that? It's a bit of a puzzle.
I'd have to defer to CSIS and Global Affairs on that kind.
Well, I think we know what they think because the IMU was quite clear back in 2021. The contemporaneous document that we have identified this as a threat. It said that Mr. Chong and also Mr. Chu, who I hope we don't all forget about in all of this, were being targeted. The word threat was used repeatedly in that document, and in particular, that information that was being collected was being directed to the Ministry of State Security. Mr. Travers, I expect you know what the PRC, Ministry of State Security, is. Do you agree with me that that's a foreign espionage agency?
It is an entity within the government, Chinese government, that engages on public safety issues and foreign activities.
Sometimes it's called secret police. Do you agree with that?
I think it. I wouldn't disagree, but my understanding is that it has a broad range of remits as an interior ministry and engaged on public safety issues.
Public safety issues in a repressive regime, as Mr. Clow was just telling us.
Yes, I agree entirely with that.
Right, right. And so getting back to what I was saying about what CSIS's view is, sir, Mr. Clow, CSIS tried to tell the Minister of Public Safety back in 2021 that it assessed that this was a threat and that it involved the collection of information and distributing it to not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of State Security, which is a different agency altogether. So what I'm suggesting to you, sir, is that CSIS did regard this as a threat, and that's why it invoked a TRM. Mr. Morrison now comes and says, well, I don't see it that way. I suppose that's his prerogative. But that was the understanding that you were all operating on the 2nd of May when you were in that meeting. Don't you agree?
I would generally agree with that is what we were operating under at that time. But we were also told very directly by the head of CSIS that they had no intelligence that spoke to a direct physical threat.
Yes, I appreciate that. Having no intelligence doesn't mean the thing's not going to happen, but it does mean that we don't have any intelligence saying it's going to happen.
That's fair.
Right. All right. Final question. Mr. Zhao was expelled a week after the leak in the Globe and Mail. We've heard Mr. Morrison, and again, you this morning explained that having looked into the matter, because I gather you didn't even know, and the Prime Minister didn't know who Wei Zhou was until reading about him in the Globe and Mail that day. But having looked into the matter, Global Affairs, assisted by CSIS, found that, in fact, Wei Zhou and the PRC consulate generally had been up to a lot of troubling things for some time before the May 2023 leak. I put it to you that had it not been for that leak in the Globe and Mail, there's no reason to think that Wei Zhou was going to be PNG'd, at least in May 2023. Do you accept that?
I would say it's impossible to separate the media coverage from that time period from the actions and decisions of government at that time. Absolutely, it impacted the focus and attention on foreign interference.
You were responding to the leak and, of course, informed by other information that you gained about Wei Zhou after the leak.
Right.
All right.
Because information came to us because of what was published in the newspaper, and it had not come to us before that.
Yes. Right. It's a troubling situation, though, isn't it, sir? Because we know that the service itself, 2 years earlier, had tried several times to inform not the PMO, but the clerk of the Privy Council, the NSIA, the public safety minister, deputy ministers all across town, the CSE, who, by the way, CSE did get the memo, but a lot of the other people I've mentioned seem not to have. So that information was trying to make its way to senior people in this government. And it took a leak, an illegal leak, an injurious leak to Canadian national security in the Globe and Mail to actually get the Prime Minister's attention. Do you agree with me, sir, that that is not the way that we should be having to rely on government employees to inform the center of things that matter?
I agree that leaks shouldn't have happened, but I also agree that we've all learned a lot in the last period of time, and that's exactly what this commission is looking into. Flow of information, lessons that should be learned, actions that should be taken. It's why we're all here.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you.